Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Wednesday, the 11th of February, comes to you from Dusseldorf in Germany. I'm here for an energy conference in Essen, and before I head off to the conference, I'm recording this from my hotel room. And I'm working quite a lot with LSEG, the London Stock Exchange Group, and in fact, I was at the closing of the London Stock Exchange trading day on Monday, and I did this recording for you. So that ties in with our focus this month. We're going to do a lot more focus on UK stocks just for the month of February. We've got a lot of clients who trade UK stocks, and here is the list. But I normally do charts a day just looking at what's going on globally, and I start just by looking at the dollar. That is sinking lower again. And the real key thing is we've made a lower high. Will we make a lower low? We've got a downside target. So that is quite key. And just remembering where the targets actually come from, they are point and figure targets put on time-based charts. And so the interesting thing here is if you look at the point and figure chart, this is a 0.5% log scale chart. Updater's point and figure is by far the best in the world. And if we look at this, you can see here the targets match up as you'd see them on a point and figure chart. But most people find it's a bit easier to understand them on a time-based chart. And of course, you can adjust the slope of the targets as well. There's a whole methodology behind how the targets work. And so the key thing is, all we're doing is just matching up the targets. So it's just that's where they come from on the chart. So coming back to just our general look at what's going on, dollar weakness is still a theme. We saw that we are seeing US markets just holding. The interesting thing is that the Nasdaq is still struggling to make new highs. So that is, October was the last high. And if we look at around the 21st, 24th of February last year, that's when we saw the sell-off in markets that was tariff related. But this is just showing some inherent weakness. We are seeing the Dow and more general indices making new highs, but we are seeing some inherent indices. Just looking quickly at Bitcoin, that's down 2.5%. Downside targets given there. A lot of people have been asking me about that. Even at the conference, people have been asking me what's my next target for Bitcoin. And the key point is I've said 55,000 based on that activation that we saw at 85. And that target has been met. Downside targets all been met. 55 is the current one. We need a recovery. Maybe we will see this generating a new downside target. And of course, you can always go to the 60-minute chart where you will see more downside targets being built. So that's the key thing there, is that those targets, we've got to wait for a recovery and then a selling thrust off a high to produce the next target. But 55 is the target at the moment. So just looking more generally, gold, that's actually been quite interesting. Looking again at the 60-minute chart, that just gives you the picture of the recovery in gold. This 5,100 level is pretty key. This is starting to look a little bit like an ascending triangle, and we have got upside targets, but a break of 51. And on the short term, we are above the cloud. Silver, a lot of people ask about silver as well, not quite as clear. And then just a quick look at the tech majors before we look at UK stocks. We can see here Apple down 30, nearly everything was down yesterday, so that is quite key as well. We are seeing a bit of recovery in Apple, but generally speaking, and Nvidia, many of you who watch my top calls for 2026 will know that I felt Nvidia has topped, and the fact that was back in October. We are in this range at the moment, 195, 170, 195. break below 170 would be bad, and we have got this downside target. And then, of course, you've got the 60-minute chart waiting to see if we activate this upside target. But for the moment, that's NVIDIA. So really quite key there to watch. Google has been the star performer. That is just pulling back a little bit and been in the news lately with the launch of this UK 100-year bond. That's going to be really very interesting to see how that performs. But maybe people are considering that Google is a safer bet than the UK government. And here we see the sterling gilt has been sinking a bit low, which has been good news for borrowing costs for the UK government, but it is in this big range, and we are still seeing, generally speaking, bond yields globally trending higher. Anyway, so we go now to the LSEG list, and this is basically the FTSE 100 list, and we just go through the stocks. So here we can see Rio Tinto, what a star performer. Notice how you don't have a target. You don't always have a target, and that's quite key. We're seeing here St James's Place. That's the worst performer today. Again, you had upside targets, but the thing that should have tempered your view there is this move below the cloud on the 60-minute chart and downside target there, and we just plummeted. So that's one of the worst performers. And we've seen tech in the UK hit really badly. Relx is one. Sage had a really bad day yesterday. Downside target given and met, and so we're seeing there on the short-term chart that we've been below the cloud on Sage for more than a year. Great company, technically, but the reality is the stock has been in a downtrend. So really quite key when we just go through the charts. Now, over the coming days and for the rest of this month, we will do some scanning, trying to find the good examples in the UK market. But basically, if you've got UK stocks, this is just a really good way to just see. And you'll quite often notice that the top performers are the best performers. Now, this is JD Sports. It's a medium-term chart again, so it's a daily chart. I can go to the short-term, the 60-minute chart. We can see it's a much more mixed picture. And if we look at London Stock Exchange, again, we've got a downside target there on the daily chart, below the cloud, remember, but we're seeing a little bit of recovery here on the 60-minute chart. So really quite interesting there. And if we look at Shell, we just looked at that one as mixed targets, mixed picture, not so clear in trending. So that's really quite key. Of course, Anglo, lots of upside targets alongside Rio. We're seeing lots of upside targets there, so that's really really strong. AstraZeneca, another one that's just given an upside target, so that was given back in October, November, and it's saying that by later this year, that's the trajectory of the price target. So quite often it's the case of not when, or not what, but when will these targets be met? And if you're trading shorter term or CFDs or options, then you'll want to be looking at these 60-minute charts and looking for opportunity and targets. And of course, you can go right down to 1-minute targets. So for energy markets, which is an area that we cover a lot of ground for our clients, down in the 1 minute, you get right down to 1-minute targets. So that's something you can do as well. But the key thing is we will look at UK stocks. They are performing quite well. And again, if we look at the FTSE future, we can see that we're seeing that is on an upward trajectory versus the NASDAQ. That is a much, much clearer run higher. And so the FTSE above 10,000 and just continuing up there because there's a lot more defensive play stocks in the FTSE 100. It's not so technology laden. And of course, the key thing is the Mag 7 make up a huge part of the US stock market, which is why the US is underperforming. The key thing is you can type any chart you want. You literally just enter your code, type the stock you want, and you can straight away draw the target. So I can just take literally any chart. So if I take something like EasyJet and just hit the T key, it will put all the targets on for you. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, back in London. See you then. Bye for now.